Okay, so now let's try some subtraction of mixed numbers. So we have subtract 7.5 minus 4 and 1/7. Now, same as before, if we're using one method over the other one, and instead of fixing your answer, we're going to have to fix the problem up front. So in these cases, we might have to borrow. So I'll show you what I mean in the next example, but for this one, let's stick with our improper fraction method and see how that works. So let's change them to improper first. So we got 7 times 2 is 15, 14, plus 1 is 15. And 4 times 7 is 28, plus 1 is 29. So we need our LCD, which would be a glare. Let's see if I can make it a little better. There we go. A little less light, but we can still see it. So you should get 14, right? And now let's change our denominators. Okay, so now we got to multiply this one by 7, so we got to multiply the top by 7. So 7 times 15 is what? I think it's going to be a 105, right? And now for this one, we're going to have to multiply it just by 2 to get to 14. So 29 times 2 is 58. All right, so now we can subtract those. Looks like we get a 47 maybe. So 47 over 14. So how many times does 14 go into 47? I think maybe 3 times, right? 3 times and 5 left over. So remember, if you're still not fast with this, it's okay. And if you want to use, scratch on the side, you can do that. 14 goes into 47 3 times. 3 times 14 is 42. Subtract and get your 5. So, quick way to just confirm you're doing it right. Now, so let's take a look at this one. Now, when you're subtracting the whole numbers and subtracting the fractions, sometimes it'll work fine. Like in this case, we could have done that. 7 minus 4 is 3, and then 1/2 minus 1/7 would probably give you the 5/14s. It'd have to. Now, but look at this problem. If we tried to do the same sort of thing, well, 16 minus 13 is 3, but what's 1/2 minus 3, or excuse me, 1/4 minus 3/4? A common answer would be 3 and a -2 over 4. But that doesn't make a lot of sense. You can't have a positive whole number and then a negative fraction attached to it. It just doesn't make sense. So that's why it's, a little awkward to try to subtract with them as is. If you stick with the improper fraction, again, there's no problems. You're not going to have to worry about borrowing. So, the borrowing would have to steal from the 16 to make this 1/4 bigger than the 3/4. That's essentially what borrowing would do. And there's an easy way to do that stuff too. And if you're really curious, send me an email and I can explain it to you. But if you just stick with the improper fraction method, you don't even have to worry about it. So I would just stick with that. 16 times 4 is 64, plus 1 is 65. 13 times 4 is 52, plus 3 is 55. They already have the same denominator, so we can just subtract the tops. So we get 10 over 4. But 10 over 4 is not in lowest terms, so we can reduce that by 2. So we get 5 over 2. And now if we want to change it back into a mixed number, 2 goes into 5 twice with 1 left over. So we had 2.5. So essentially this will be equal to this. Kind of weird, right? So I would, like I said, I would avoid that. If you want to try it and you get something weird like this, then just say, oh, I better not do it that way. I better do it the improper fraction way. And that way you're fine. Okay, so let's do a couple more subtractions just to make sure, and then we'll go into multiplying and dividing. So, well, same as before. We got to change them to improper. So we have 9 times 6 is 54, plus 1 is 55. And 6 times 8 is 48, plus 7 is 55. So, very tempting to want to just subtract and say it's 0 over -2 or something and just say it's 0, right? Well, we can't do that. I mean, just looking at the size of these numbers, we got 9 minus 6 essentially, so it's got to be close to 3. This is actually closer to 7, right? So 9 minus 2 is, or 9 minus 7 is 2. So we know the answer is about 2. So it can't be 0. But what we're missing, of course, is our LCD. So 6 and 8, we did that one already. We know it's 24. So let's change those to 24s. Times this one by 4. Well, 55 times 4, I believe, is 220. And 55 times 3, because we had to multiply by 3 to get to 24. So that's going to be what, 165? And so now, 220 minus 165, I want to say is 55. So we have 55 over 24. And so now, well, can we reduce it at all? I don't think so. Only 5 and 11 goes into 55, and neither one of those go into 24. So we can't reduce it, but we can change it to a mixed number. So 24 goes into 55 how many times? I think it goes in twice, right? So 2 times 24 is 48. So what's 48 off of 55? I want to say it's 7. So 2 and 7/24. So what about this last one? Now some of you are looking at that and say, oh, I can do this one fast. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is equal to 6 2/3. Done, right? No, that is not right. And the reason why is because you're not subtracting fractions. You subtracted the whole numbers fine, but you didn't subtract the fractions right. It's because there's no fraction here to subtract from 2/3. So that's the problem. So how do we fix it? Well, we can do a couple of things, but let's do our improper fractions. So remember, improper fractions, if we have just a whole number, we can just put it over 1. That's improper. So that side's done. The second one, well, 1 times 3 is 3, plus 2 is 5. So we need to get an LCD now. So what's our LCD between 1 and 3? Well, it's got to be 3. So we're changing the bottom into a 3, which means the top would have to change to 21 is correct. And now we can subtract the tops. Whoops. 16 over 3, which equals 5 1/3. Now remember, if you're not 100% sure if you're changing it right, just change it back real quick. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. So we're good. That's always the check with these problems. Same thing over here. 2 times 24 is 48, plus 7 is 55. Good. All right, so that's adding and subtracting. A little bit cumbersome because you do have some choices, and you definitely need to keep those LCDs in place. But for multiplying and dividing, it's a little easier, and there's only one method. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll kill this video. We still got a little bit of time. In order to multiply or divide mixed numbers, we must first change them into improper fractions and then multiply or divide as before. So there's no way around, there's no alternative method. You have to change them to improper fractions. So let's see what that looks like. So we have 5 over 3. 2 times 7 is 14 plus 1 is 15 over 7. Okay. Now we can apply the same rules as we did with multiplying and dividing before, as we did before. We can cross cancel. So in this case, we can cancel between the 3 and the 15. And so we have 5 times 5, which is 25 over 7. And that goes in 3 times, with 4 left over. So 3 and 4/7. And that's it. Let's do it again. Now, negatives in front of mixed numbers you want to be careful with. The safest way to do it is to ignore them. When you change them to improper fractions, ignore the negatives. So, it helps if I can write a G. I'm struggling here, folks. I-G-N-O-R-E, the negatives, when changing. So put the negative out in front because it is a negative fraction, but then just change it like you normally would. 7 times 2 is 14 plus 1 is 15. 1 times 5 is 5 plus 2 is 7. So we got to make sure you put over the right denominator, which is a 5, not a 2. All right, so now we got them changed correctly. And so now we can cross cancel between the 5 and the 15. So 1 and a 3. And now we got 2 negatives that we're multiplying. So the answer better be positive. So 3 times 7 is 21. And 2 times 1 is 2. And that should be 10.5. So you will get faster at changing them from improper to mixed numbers. So don't get frustrated. Let's just do these last 2 and then we'll conclude this video. All right, so we got a negative fraction. So 6 times 5 is 30, plus 3 is 33, and then divided by 7 times 3 is 21, plus 1 is 22. But now it's division. So now we got to remember our same switch flip or whatever catchphrase you want to use. So we had change to a multiplication and then change it to the reciprocal. All right, now we can do some cross canceling here. 11 goes into both of those. So it goes in twice, goes in 3 times. So now multiplying straight across, 3 times 3 is 9, and one of them's negative, so we will have a negative fraction for our answer. So 9 over, looks like 10. Done. All right, one more. So 8 over 1 times, whoops, not times yet, divided by, looks like 16 over 5. So we got times 5 over 16, cross cancel, a 1 and a 2. So it looks like we're going to get 5 over 2, which we did that one as well. 5, that's 2.5. So they will get quicker the more you do. So that's the biggest thing is practice, practice, practice. And there's always a bunch of problems in your textbook. You can do the odd ones. The answers are in the back of the textbook. So you have to leaf through the digital textbook to the end, but the answers are in there for the odd ones. So if you want to practice, you have the ability to do that. Otherwise, let me know. Alrighty, we'll see you in the next video.